This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I'd like to call our April 21st Board of Finance meeting to order. Evening, everyone.
Hello.
First item on our agenda, minutes from our April 17th meeting. Everyone's had a chance to review them. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just have a couple of points to make. I meant to make this last month. With respect to the agenda for last meeting, the fourth point was it's described as finalize fiscal year 2021-2022 budget, and I don't think that's an accurate description. I think what we did was we deliberated on the most recent version of the budget, and we ultimately voted on three numbers that went to the public hearing, right?
You're not talking about these minutes, you're talking about from...
So I'm talking about the minutes from last month. So the description of last month, item number 4, is finalize fiscal 2021-22 budget. And then under that topic of finalizing the budget, it says that Mr. Frieda gave an update on the American Rescue Plan, which will provide the town with $2.3 million, $2.34 million, and it will be distributed by the state in 2 payments, as you can all read. And it also says that Mr. Frieda will present a no tax increase at the public hearing on April 6th. So that wasn't the case, right? So Mr. Frieda presented the budget that we all voted on, and that included a very slight mill rate increase.
No, it didn't.
Right? As that version of the budget.
Well, there'll be no tax increase, and actually we're going to be reducing the mill rate from 30.72 to 30.71.
Yep. So again, we're talking about the minutes
right
from the last Board of Finance meeting in terms of what was done, and I just think that it should be accurate that
well, but that is what you said, right, Mike?
Yeah.
I said there was
that's
no...
accurate.
I mean,
whether or not that's what you think he presented at the town meeting
right.
is a different topic, but he did say this.
I said it. There'd be no tax increase.
Mr. Frieda said he will present a no tax increase at the public hearing on April 6th.
Right.
Which you did.
And at the April 6th meeting, I said there'd be no tax increase.
So what you presented at the public hearing was a no tax increase?
I told the audience there'd be no tax increase. That's what I told them. And there'd be no tax increase.
But that wasn't the budget that you presented at the public hearing. That wasn't the budget that we all voted on.
But I explained that even though it shows a 0.47 increase, that there's going to be no tax increase. It's going to be a 0% increase.
Understood. But again, the point of that particular meeting was to address the budget where it stood at that point in time. It's a work in progress, and so I think it's really important to be accurate at each stage of the game. I mean, can't we all agree on that? That we really should be accurate in what we're saying and what we voted on?
If I understand your edit, it's that what Mike said at the last meeting doesn't reconcile with the meeting. This is the statement that Mike said, though. Whether or not it was or you believe it was accurate is, I guess, for another topic of conversation, but that's what he said.
So the minutes reflect what I said.
So we're just going to support something that is factually incorrect just because it was said?
But at the April 6th meeting, I explained there'd be no tax increase. And I explained how there'd be no tax increase. Mm-hmm. So what's inaccurate about the minutes? What's inaccurate?
So what is inaccurate is the purpose, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of that meeting.
Are you saying he said something different than this?
Absolutely.
Okay. What did you say was different than this?
What would be presented at the public hearing would be the budget that we all voted on last month. And the numbers that we all voted on last month did not...
On the expenses were
the
what he
budget
presented.
packet that ultimately was presented, this budget packet that was presented to the people of North Haven included a mill rate increase, correct?
There's no mill rate increase.
You didn't answer my question.
There's no in-bill rate increase. I explained at the April 6th meeting, there'll be no tax increase. And I took the audience through how there'd be no tax increase. In the minutes, that's exactly what I said. So I'm not sure what your point is here.
My point is that it seems like there were a wide variety of different versions of the budget that we're talking about. There was the version that we were all handed last month. There was the version that we voted on at the end of the meeting last month. There was the version that the people were presented with for the public hearing, and then there was the version that Mr. Frieda presented at the public hearing. Those are 4 different versions of the budget. And so I'm just trying to be accurate at a given point in time as to what we're talking about.
Well, what's accurate is there's not going to be a tax increase this year. It's what I said at the last Board of Finance meeting. It's what I said at the public hearing. There's no tax increase.
And
So-
what is represented in these minutes is what he said at our meeting.
So the budget that you presented did not include a tax increase at the public hearing?
The budget included, it showed a .47 mill rate
Yes, it did.
increase. And I explained there'd be no tax increase.
Eventually.
And I explained how there'd be no tax increase.
Eventually.
So what I said at the public meeting was accurate. And what I said at the Board of Finance meeting was accurate. Let me repeat it for a 4th time. There's no tax increase this year. None.
We're not there yet. We haven't deliberated on anything, so nothing has been decided
I think what he did was
yet.
express his opinion, a strong opinion, since he's the first selectman.
Right.
But I don't think there's
There's
any
nothing
question
not
that he made
factual.
the statement. Whether or not you believe it accurate, I guess, could have been raised at that time.
Did we all get the same packet last week?
Last
month,
I'm not
rather?
arguing the packet, Nancy. I'm arguing what the minutes say. Do they reflect what was said at the meeting? And I guess my position is, I heard him say that. That's my recollection. He said that.
I said it.
You dispute whether it's accurate. I understand that. But that's what he said.
And so we're just going to support that.
Well, the minutes are reflective of what I said.
So again, we're going to support something that is factually incorrect just because he said it.
There's nothing factually incorrect. The minutes of the meeting is what Mr. Frieda said in that meeting.
I
what I
guess I
said.
would posit this. Had you said, I'd like to go on record that I disagree with that statement, I think that could have been reflected here.
Right.
I don't think that was said, right?
And were you at the public hearing?
Yes, I was.
Did you make a comment about this at the public hearing? You did not?
No.
Why
becau-
not?
Because I'm a member of the Board of Finance. I'm not supposed to make a comment at the public hearing. We are the hosts of the public hearing. So no, I am not
Well,
supposed
look,
to make that
the
comment.
bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, for those watching on TV, there's no tax increase this year. The minutes, we're not
So I
going to...
would like this particular line changed. We did not finalize the budget last month, nor will we finalize the budget this month with our vote.
Are you making a resolution to that point?
I am making a resolution to change that in our minutes.
Is there a second to that resolution?
I'll second, but I'd like discussion for a second.
Sure.
There's a resolution and a second. Discussion?
I think if we're going to do this the right way, then I think if what Nancy wants to say is that she disputes that statement, that should be entered into this month's minutes. That the minutes from last month, again, are accurate, I believe. But if there's a dispute now, in retrospect perhaps, and you want to say for this month meeting that you don't agree with that, I guess I don't have an objection to that.
Again, the category is finalize the 2021-22 budget. We didn't do that last month, and
I'm
we're
sorry,
not going to do that
and
this
I
month.
apologize, you sort of switched topics on me then,
Nope,
Nancy. I thought
that
you
was
told-
my proposal,
What?
to
Okay,
change
sorry.
that language.
All right.
So we're not talking about this other line anymore?
All right, any further discussion? There's a motion, there's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Nays have it. Did you have another comment on the minutes before we approve them? Hearing none, can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Old business, we have none. New business.
Well, I'm assuming there was a
sorry.
name. Was there any nays?
I stand corrected. Because I heard overwhelming, any nays to accepting the minutes of the meeting?
Nay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
New business, expenditures.
Oh, we're starting with expenditures, okay, sure.
We always start with expenditures.
I like revenues.
You like revenues?
He likes revenue. We all like revenue.
Of course, everybody
all
likes
like
Look at the
revenues.
list, expenditures, budget, is, you know, it's kind of the first thing. Anything on expenditures?
One
Yes.
second.
Ed, on the public libraries on page 4,
Yep.
both the building maintenance and repair, which seems to be at 206%, and the custodial contract, could either of those be covered by the CARES Act? I understand these are expenditures, but I'm just trying to get a sense for what over expenditures could actually be covered.
I haven't read the details of what's going to be covered and not on it, but we'll check into it. I know that's part of we've been delayed in trying to get this grant going with that generator, so we've incurred some costs for a temporary
So that's-
generator.
so
So
it
that's
is
what's
the
running this thing over, right?
Okay. And central facilities on page 7. I mean, I could go through individual line items, but it seems as though the entire department is just kind of a mess. It's at 140% as a department, and individual line items are anywhere from, 118 up to almost 500% over. Is there something that,
Well, correct. We can't anticipate when boilers are going to go down, or we have problems with the HVAC or the roof. And through the course of this past year, we've had to deal with all those. Some new roofs on the rental properties, HVAC, I know we're working on something over in the annex right now, and they're just not anticipated. They just break. I mean, they've been there for 20, 25 years.
right?
So we try to get as much out of them as we can. But eventually, they just go.
Yeah, well, we've spent almost $500,000 so far this year, and $58,000 just in the last month. So that seems like a lot, and I understand things do break. We're all homeowners, so I get
Right.
it. But I just wanted to point that out. Diane, if you had something, please go ahead.
Yeah, I did. So we're still seeing on page 10, the maintenance and repair on the animal control. Is that the same as last time? There's still more being encumbered. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I don't think that project's finished yet. There's probably a few incidentals that have to be taken care of. Excuse me.
Okay, and then in fire, there's a couple line items. Office supplies always puzzles me, but office supplies is usually in a lot. Then I see, heating and repair
Yeah.
and building maintenance and repair.
Yes, I had the same question. So what broke now in these brand-new buildings, or recently renovated buildings, that cost us?
I think we handed
Looks like,
Yeah, it's,
out some detail on that. Didn't I last month or the month before?
yeah, but it
I know, it keeps growing, I know.
keeps growing. That's the problem. It's not
Off the top of my
like,
head, I couldn't tell you from over there, but I could get you a run of what happened.
just like equipment and supply. I mean, so they kind of keep going up. So is it the same issue or is it a new issue? I think that's our question.
That I would have to pull the detail on. I couldn't
All
tell
right.
off the top of my head.
Okay.
because again, we're budgeting $95,000, and we're already at, 150% of that, and we're only 3/4 of the way through the year. So we spent, again, another $11,000 this year with another 23 encumbrance.
That's true, but a lot of these things with what's going on with COVID and everything, we can't anticipate everything that's going on, and I don't think either the departments can.
No,
So what we try to ask them to do is undercut something else to offset it.
No, I don't, I think if we knew ahead of time when we got this, especially we keep asking, I think
Yeah.
if we had this is a continuation or something, maybe we wouldn't be asking the question.
Right, so for example, if a lot of this came from the Monowese Firehouse,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
being converted to a hybrid firehouse now that has both career and volunteer, well then,
Yeah.
that would be a partial explanation. We'd want to
Right.
know more specifically, but that would be useful.
I just couldn't answer those off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'd have to go to Paul for that.
No, that's fine, but because we keep asking, if we had it ahead of time, I think that would eliminate our question.
Right. And in that same category, under the fire department, the contractual replacement staffing, again, just in 1 month, we're looking at contractual replacement of over $50,000. And so that particular line item is already over $100,000. So I mention this just because, again, when we increase our police and fire department, this is the line item that balloons. So I'm just mentioning this because it's something that everyone needs to understand. As we add more firefighters and police officers, that we're gonna see big increases, like $50,000 a year and already being over budget.
Anything else on expenditures?
On page 12, transportation hauling, are we still hauling things? It's, looks like month to date is $86,000, and we're 253%.
Yeah, I'm sure they're still hauling stuff. I think part of it could be just some old bills that came in that we just had to put through.
I see. So this is still left over from?
Some of it could be, but I'm sure there's other stuff going on.
Okay. And under streets and roads, the big increase in overtime, is that something that could be covered by what was formerly called MRSA?
Yes.
Okay. And I think in that same category, streets and roads.
Equipment, we have,
And Nancy, going back to your question on MRSA, on that legal sheet shows you all the accounts that will be covered, so you can match them to here.
Yep. On page 13, again, when I see custodial contract, I assume it's a contract. So when I see a contract is at a 711%, I don't know what that means.
I think what that entails is all the extra cleaning that was done for, because of COVID. So that ballooned that account.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Which we've scaled back now.
Right.
So that'll start
Well, the
subsiding.
CDC has just said,
They just said,
super
right.
cleaning is not necessary.
Right.
Right.
So
After we spent all the money.
after we spent all the money, thank
they
you very
keep,
much.
yeah, they
Yes,
keep changing all
exactly.
the rules.
Exactly.
That was a huge expense.
And 14, the track and field facility maintenance, again, is over the contracted amount. So I'm just wondering what that's all about.
Well, I think there's a contract about, and I think there's other incidentals that come up that end up having to be charged to that account.
Again, you know, this particular track and field maintenance, they didn't have to do anything for any football games because there weren't any football games. And now we're at, 116%. So I'm just trying to understand why we're $10,000 over on something.
Is this the track at the football field?
Vandecore.
Track and field.
So
Yeah,
so are we, I guess the question is, are we patching that track, because it is in disrepair? Or we're doing stuff?
I thought that was a separate expenditure. Well, you tell me yet.
No, we're not we're not patching the
I don't
track.
think we were
so-
fixing
We're not.
that. So this is
So then what
literally
is,
maintenance.
yeah, so then what's the maintenance, yeah, what's the maintenance if it's in disrepair?
That's my
What-
question.
what-
But the
how much
schools,
ma-
the schools have been out there using the fields for recreation, and so that might be part of it. But look, and the bottom line on all this is that in approximately 500 line items in this budget, we're going to balance this budget. And there's going to be lines that come under and lines that go over. It's the same thing every year. And at the town meeting in September, anything over $20,000, we explain it and we justify it, and we get the public to vote on it. So there are going to be line items and volatility in these line items that are unanticipated events. And the roof and the boilers at the library, the roof next door, these are things that, we can't foresee at night, so.
Agreed. Anything else for expenditures?
All right, my last thing, recreation center maintenance. That's not just a little, so obviously something happened there, Ed, I don't know, do you know? The encumbrance is, it's like it's
37,
Yeah,
37.
37.
That's, we're have to get a boiler,
Oh, that's a boy, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
and that's expensive.
Yeah, no, I know that, no, okay.
Like 6 for your house.
And on the very last page, Ed, if you could just explain to me, I might have asked this last month, the principal bonds and notes.
Right. Right, when we refinanced, we had the principal and interest changed, so we had to, that's why we're going to go over on one and under on the other.
I see. So the one that's
We,
below.
when they're we have to only take the callable ones, and based on the amount of those, we have to pay those off.
I see. So we're
It's not a
under
cut and
5
dry
million and-
situation.
Got it. And below that, in capital, it says 3 police vehicles. This is a mystery to me. It says year-to-date expended is $139,881, and then month-to-date is another $18,000. So did we buy the 3 vehicles, and then we have this additional?
It could have been the light bars. Could be as simple as the light bars and they fit out the unit.
But wouldn't that be in the light
No.
bar line item?
If it's part of the, no, there's light bars they can change on other vehicles. But it could be as simple as the communications that they put in the vehicle when they fit it out.
It's the month-to-date payment for March, but we might have just made a partial payment on it until something was fixed, and then we gave them the rest of the money.
But it's all for the police vehicles?
All for 3 vehicles, yes.
As opposed to something else related to
Nope,
the
it's all,
vehicles?
it's just 3 vehicles.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Michael, you got something?
Yes, we're unfortunately not blessed with the presence of Mr. Lianis this evening, and I'm sure he would want to ask about page 13 here. The winter maintenance supplies, I know, of course, we had a long and ugly winter at times. Is the encumbrance there still accurate? And I know that, you know, salt prices went up because I use it on my food a lot. And
Quite a bit.
yeah. So we've got a year-to-date that's virtually what we anticipated in that line, and then we still have an encumbrance for about the same amount, 137,000.
Correct.
Are those numbers still accurate?
What I spoke to Mike Maturo 2 days ago and told him to reconcile what's going on here, because some bills are still outstanding, will have to be charged against it, and I need to know what is left in this. So him and his secretary are working on getting that resolved. So, because I said it's a huge number at this point, so let me know if there's bills to go against it, we'll take care of it, and if there's anything else, we'll just reverse it.
Okay.
So it's being worked on.
All right. All right, I think Mr. Lianis is somewhat happy with that answer.
Revenue?
So I'd just like to point out under tax revenue, if you compare the month-to-date revenue for the month of March and you compare it to the previous month, this basically reflects that people took advantage of the extended grace period on paying their taxes. And clearly, the Board of Selectmen did the right thing in voting to extend that grace period, and that if you really compare the bottom line on this long sheet that lists all of the current tax collections, and you just look at the month of March, starting at the bottom, and you work your way up, you'll see it goes from, 900 this year. Last year it was 305, the previous year it was 371, the year before that it was 297. So you can see there's basically been a tripling. And so people certainly took advantage of it, and we're still a little bit behind in terms of our total tax collection. As you can see, we're at 96.8%. And if you look again at the previous years for the month of March, we were at 99, 100%. So for the purpose of developing a budget, of course, we target a 98.5% collection rate in order to calculate the mill rate. So Ed, are you confident that next month we'll have this up to where we need to be? And do you think that this will impact our surplus at all this year?
Well, I think we're going to collect 100% of our taxes by June 30th. We have 3 months to go, and as you said, everybody's delayed paying them, so I should expect a good run in April.
Not everybody, but,
No, not everybody.
The people that don't have
Yeah, the
mortgages,
people that
certainly
decide to, yes.
So,
And
okay. that
and
was my-
delinquent notices are being sent out also, so.
And February and March collections were a little ahead. I mean, I understand Nancy's point, and I saw it myself, but
I'm sure.
when you look at the individual months, we're a little bit ahead. We're at 4.2 right now for February and March versus 3.9 February and March last year.
Sir?
Michael?
I just have a general question for the finance director regarding revenue, and That is, what items on our revenue sheet here are either added line items or significantly different line items, different than what was forecasted? What I'm asking about is what irregular income did we receive this year that we may or may not be able to anticipate to have next year?
Well, the only category that would be was the miscellaneous under state of Connecticut for the FEMA and the money that we received from the state. That was the only new line that was added. All the other lines are existing and should carry over.
Yeah. So,
Well, except elderly disabled homeowners over with, so
Okay.
that won't carry.
yeah, and that miscellaneous line from the state was for what program?
FEMA-related reimbursements.
That was FEMA, yeah,
Storm.
FEMA.
Let's look at the
Yeah.
tornado.
Yeah.
No, COVID.
COVID, yeah.
COVID, sorry.
COVID.
Has the Board of Ed received any ESSER funds or other sources of funds that will be included as a general revenue item?
On here?
Yes.
No, those funds are separate.
They're outside our budget.
That's outside the budget.
Their
yeah.
funds are, those?
Yeah, they have that sheet they give you all the various grants. Those are separate.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know if the ESSER was going to be grouped with the other special ed grants and other excess cost grants that they receive outside the budget. So any of those ESSER funds then are going to go to pay expenses that are not included in the education budget that we receive from them.
That sounds correct.
That's right.
And it will not run through here. Nor do the other Board of Education grants that he shows you on his reports.
Right, well, okay. All right, I mean, ECS is a grant, and it comes through as regular revenue. So I don't
That's-
know which grants are going to be.
That's because when the state sends down, OPM sends down the list of state money, ECS is on there, as is the new ESSER funds for next year. So they go on here, and then we fund the Board of Ed budget separately. That's because they're listed on the state report. The other ones aren't.
If the grant is listed on the state report, it goes in as regular revenue.
We've always gone and done it that way, yes.
Okay, so special, okay,
But they have other grants they apply for and go for, and they have
Yeah.
nothing to do with this.
well, I didn't know if that ESSER grant, say, was intended to offset or rectify regular line item expenses that are in their budget. But okay, I mean, they can handle it either way, but I just, we have to know what we're seeing.
Right. Well, this year, that wasn't on OPM's report, so there's no ESSER money in here, obviously. Next year, there will be, because it was listed in their report to me to put in.
For next year.
Correct. You'll see it in next year's budget. It's like 400-some thousand.
We will talk about that in a few minutes.
Okay?
Speaking of ECS, Ed, it looks like we've gotten half of that, and when do you think we'll get the second payment?
I'm open soon. Usually, I think we get it in June. We get 25, 25, and 50 in those allotments, I think.
Okay, so in June, okay.
Yeah.
And it's good news that we received the pilot grant, or the pilot money. And so that's a nice, and again, the MRSA bonded distribution, I assume that this is your anticipated estimated expenditure?
Yes, it'll match the sheet you have,
Right.
the long sheet.
Okay.
That's what we've got to charge to MRSA.
Right. And just, again, just in terms of pointing out something that we've all been following very closely is on the second page, the powerful trio of building fees, fire fees, and paramedic services. Obviously, the building fees and fire fees go hand in hand because the fire fees, of course, reflect plan review for both new construction and renovation. So it's really nice to see a big jump there of $133,000. And the building fees have made a little bit of an increase up to 58%, but still not quite where we'd hoped they'd be. So.
Special funds.
The March MRSA expense. Is that?
That's on the other paper. Oh, the expense, sorry, Mike.
Is that a new item on there, Ed, the 178,000 MRSA?
The only-
expense?
During the year, the only thing that will be charged through MRSA are things we actually charge there, and that is the purchase of two, I think they're 6 or 8-wheel dump trucks. They can also do snow plowing, and those came in, and that was what was charged there. The month-to-month public works expenses
Right.
run through here till the end of the year.
Yes, I know, yeah.
Okay.
That I know.
So that's 2 vehicles,
2 vehicles.
2 trucks.
So those are things that we applied for waivers?
Correct.
And we
Last
got
year.
them?
Yes. And they finally came in. They took a while to come in, but.
Just out of curiosity, Ed, what is our track record with applying for waivers? It seems like it's pretty good.
Pretty good, but I think we've been denied once or twice on certain things.
Once or twice?
Yeah.
Yeah,
About 75%.
Yeah.
really? That's
accuracy,
great.
yep.
That's excellent.
If there's nothing else on
What's
special
our
fund,
slugging percentage?
Board of Ed,
Board of Ed.
Can't read this report.
It's really tiny.
They need to do a better job. You can't read this report.
Yeah, the medical workers count.
Even
is
as
very tiny.
even the regular, as a copy, you can't see it.
Alan, could you request that they just do it on ledger size and increase it? The Board of Ed.
Well,
I know. Can't read it.
Ellen, we'll take care of that. We have a Zoom meeting with Patrick and Howard this week, so I do anyways. I add on some other subjects, so I'll take care of that.
If there's nothing else on Board of Ed, make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
The reports?
The reports,
The
yes.
report as presented. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Our fiscal year 21-22 budget. Mr. Frieda, would you like to update us on the revenues, specifically the American Rescue Plan?
Yes, so I've been on the phone for the greater part of the day with our federal government representatives and state representatives, and in this budget here that we're bringing to referendum, the first aspect of the Federal CARES Act, the American Rescue Act, there you'll see $1,170,000 in this fiscal year, and meaning the one we're talking about tonight, and $1,170,000 in next fiscal year. So late yesterday and early today, we started to receive notifications that the second aspect of this, something I mentioned in a previous meeting, county funding, was starting to be finalized. So the county funding projections have just come out, and the county funding is based on a per capita formula. The federal government has put estimates out to all the municipalities. So what does it mean for North Haven? About $4,593,000. That is an estimate right now. They're going to be recalculating it and going back to ensure they've got the right per capita information in terms of population. But it's very important for everyone to understand that the guidance right now is still unfolding. The guidance that we do know, whether it's for the first part that's in this budget and in the following fiscal year's budget starting in July, or this county money that we just learned, all of us, that we're going to be receiving. We don't know when. Let me review the guidance that we know, and this is right from the federal government. It is to be used for sewer infrastructure improvements, or broadband infrastructure improvements, or water infrastructure improvements, or to apply against lost revenue in the fiscal year 2019-2020. And that lost revenue can be grand list decline, it could be building permit fees, it could be interest income expenses as it relates to us. That's the guidance right now. There's two things that are very important for everyone to note, It cannot be used directly to reduce taxes or a mill rate, and it cannot be used to fund pensions. Ed and I, and this is very important, no one should say that we should reduce taxes by half a mil, three-quarters of a mil, 2 mils because of this. We will put the town in an audit situation with the federal government. Consider it like an IRS audit. And they could be a clawback of the money if we don't use it properly. I want to repeat the guidance again. Sewer improvements, water improvements, broadband improvements, and creating bandwidth for internet access. Lost revenue as it relates to things like building permit fees or grand list decline. In the second phase on the Treasury guidance, or the second phase of Treasury guidance, with the monies that I just mentioned, approximately $4,593,000, the Treasury and the federal government could say the municipality can use it for art councils, for art programs. The municipality can use it for grants for 501(c)(3) corporations. If that happens, there might be a separate set of guidance that the money has to go elsewhere on items that are outside any fiscal year budget. So we didn't calculate. We knew about the county money. We didn't know what it was until late yesterday and early today. And again, all day long I'm on the phone on this, okay? Statewide Zoom calls getting updates. So there now appears to be another $4,593,000 or thereabouts. And somewhere on or about May 11th, there'll be additional guidance on how that money is to be spent. And that's where we're at right now.
Thank you. Before we move to the revenue side of our budget, you'll notice you have 2 sheets in your budget. One which now spreads over the 3 positions that changed, everything from salary to FICA to medical to pension to deferred comp. You also have some housekeeping, I like to call it, changes, both in radio maintenance, insurance, and civil defense. Ed also added 3 items to our 5-year plan: the town hall roof, town hall windows, and the relocated transfer station recycling. If you have any questions on that expense side, or if you have questions on page 6 and 7, which is basically our revenue side.
Rich, I'm sorry,
I'm saying, I just explained the changes on the expense side, the 3 positions that were changed, as well as some housekeeping that Ed had with our radio, medical, and 911. Some items we added to the 5-year plans, those 2 sheets. And then the other portion is really pages 6 and 7 of our budget, which is the mill rate calculation and the income budget. So, are there questions on any of those items?
well, maybe Ed could point out, there's a couple of items on the revenue side that appear to be adjusted. Maybe Ed could tell us what those were, right?
Yes, I could. I think first one was project fund transfers. I think we bumped, if I'm not mistaken, we bumped that up from 500 to 700 because we're using police outside duty funds. What else did we have? Supplemental auto taxes, we were a little conservative on that at the beginning. I spoke with Gary, and we bumped that up to nearly 50,000.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. The last one was supplemental auto tax. We bumped that up after speaking with Gary because our number was a little conservative, and that is now $1,050,000. Town clerk fees, we spoke with Stacy as well, and that was bumped up to $650,000. I think that was it.
That's it. That was it, Ed.
Those
That's
two,
right.
yeah.
So, I'm sorry, project fund transfers,
Please stop. Well, it's 500 from another old project, and also 200 we added from police outside duty for next year.
so 200 total.
700 total.
Oh.
No, it went up 200, it's 700 total.
700 total,
From
right?
500.
500 to 700,
Yeah.
yes.
And then the other two, I'm sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yeah. Supplemental auto taxes were moved up to $1,050,000. And as you can see, 1920, we were over there anyway. And town clerk fees, we moved up to $650.
Okay. And where are we reflecting the American Rescue Plan?
State and federal aid.
$1,170,000 under federal,
I
fourth
see.
category down.
Got it. And so we're only reflecting 1,860,000?
No, that's grants for municipal projects, the old BRSA.
Oh, okay.
The
So
one above it, $1,170,000.
170.
Right.
And again, that's only the town side. It's not reflecting any of the money that we're getting for the education,
You talking about the federal funding?
federal funding.
That's only the town side.
So
Well, right above it, what OPM sent us, though,
Right.
was the federal lesser money, the 473.
The mo-
that's a different thing.
Different, yes.
Yeah.
The $1,170,000 is not anything to do with education, it's the town money.
Right. So the question is, will the federal money come through the town and be distributed to the education budget?
Not
Because
right now.
The
No, it-
education, they should be receiving $2 million as
Right.
part of the American Rescue Plan. So that's not reflected here at all.
No, it's not, no. That
What?
$1,170,000 includes town money, that's the town
It's
money.
just I understand.
Right.
But so my question is the American Rescue Plan Part 2, I've handed out to everyone,
Right.
Ellen has handed out to everyone the two parts. So one is Department of Education, and one is state and local fiscal recovery funds. So one is for the town, and one is for
Right.
education, and it spells out very specifically the timing of it, how long you have to use it, and very specifically when it can be used. And so the education portion of this budget, they have 3 years to use it, and it can be used, if you look at R in this budget, it can be used for operations. So that, to me, says that it can absolutely be used to support our budget. In fact, I will read it to you. Use of funds. Under section 604. Other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of and continuity of services in local educational agencies and continuing to employ existing staff of the local educational agency. That, to me, says that our Board of Education can use this $2 million to support their budget. So why wouldn't it be reflected as a source of revenue for our town?
Because what we don't know if it's going to be sent directly to them like one of the ESSERs was. So we don't have any guidance on the fact it's coming through the town. We don't know yet. Patrick Stirk, when he addressed this, I think you asked the question at the workshop session or whenever it was, maybe it was the town hearing, he told you that the monies were to be used for items outside the budget. Did he not tell you that?
I know he said that, but it's incorrect.
Right. Well,
What he said was specifically incorrect, and I'm making the reference to section R, which claims that it can be used for operational uses, and the availability of the funds says each state shall make allocations under paragraph 1 to local educational agencies in an expedited and timely manner, and to the extent practical, not later than 60 days after the receipt of such funds. So, and then it goes on to list the uses of the funds, and it's A through R. So there are lots of different ways that it can be used, and if we are getting $2.3 million on the town side, again, split over 2 years, and $2 million on the education side, with the possibility, as you say, of the county money being another $4 million, then that should be reflected on page 7 of our budget. Don't you think?
we're not going to
That
put...
didn't come through we didn't get any notice of that from OPM.
Right. So why would we put it in a budget when we have received no notice from OPM that it's coming to the town? Why would we put a fictitious number that
It's not fictitious.
Well, a number...
We've been notified that it's definitely coming to support our education fund.
But we're not notified that it's coming through to the town.
We weren't notified, period. I never saw any of this information.
You-
It might have
you-
gone to the Board of Ed
Did you not,
directly.
did you not just say it's coming directly to the education?
Right.
It will be going to fund the education, and it lists exactly how. It doesn't say very specifically whether it's going to come through the town or
Well,
not.
read
So
that
that's my
line
question.
again, because I thought you said it's coming to education departments.
Each state shall make allocations under paragraph 1 to local educational agencies in an expedited and timely.
Well, there you go. That's the answer. It's going right to the education agencies.
So isn't it going to support this budget?
So we can't put it in here if it's not coming through the town. We have no guidance on that at all.
So we're just not even going to recognize it as being.
Did Patrick not tell you that it's going to be in the form of subsidization to them? And did he not say it was supposed to go to summer-type programs and restore programs that they didn't have anymore? Did he not say that?
I know what he said, but I'm not sure that he actually read this document, because another use of the funds, specifically for the education portion of this, is subsection P, which says inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve the indoor air quality in school facilities, including mechanical and non-mechanical heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, filtering, purification, blah, 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 blah. So lots of other things. It's not just for summer programs.
Right.
There's
But he
things that-
told you that. He told you, he specifically said in public that things like ventilation systems and upgrades that were outside the operational aspect of the budget, he said that.
He also said that it could not be used for operations, and I'm reading to you that it can be used for operations.
Well,
You read this as well, Mike, so I know that you're aware of this. So this is what I don't understand. If we have literally money falling from the sky this year, it seems like, millions of dollars, don't you think it should be reflected on page 7?
No.
No.
no. I think it would have to be reflected in the grants that they get, Ed, that they have on their own side of the budget, right?
Correct. They get half a dozen, 6, 10 different grants that
Right.
they report to us.
Right.
That has nothing to do with
So it has
us.
nothing to do with us. That's where it
Right.
would show. It would show if it's coming, and you just said it, it's coming directly to the education agencies. That indicates it's going directly to the boards of education across, educations across the state. That means they would classify it as a grant like they do with the other grants that they get that are not in these line items on revenue.
It does
Okay.
not clear through our general fund.
Then if we are not going to declare it as revenue, and we're not going to acknowledge it as supporting their funds, then why are the taxpayers ultimately going to be paying for something that is already going to be paid for by the federal government?
Well, we
Why
don't know
the
that.
North Haven taxpayers.
We don't know that. We don't know that. He said publicly he's going to be using it for upgraded air duct facilities, summer programs, things that are outside the budget. That's what he said. He told us that. He
That's
to-
also what he said he's going to be using the ESSER $2 million for.
So what is your point on this? I think we've established it can't be put in revenue here because you just read that it's going directly to the education agencies.
So my question is, if we have $2 million definitely on the town side, $2 million definitely on the education side, and potentially another $4 million in county money, and the only thing that we have reflected so far as revenue associated with this American Rescue Plan is $1,170,000, then I don't think that that's an accurate reflection of the revenue that's coming in.
So if the money goes directly to the boards of education and they classify it as a grant like they do with the other grants that they have, and he decides to spend the money on summer programs, items outside the budget, air duct quality improvements at the elementary schools, and he does everything he said at the public meeting, what's your point?
My point is that that should have an impact on what we are ultimately, if there's money left over, plus they also have $850,000 in capital improvements as well as the carryover funds. They also have the COVID rescue funding. They have the ESSER 1. I mean, there's lots and lots of money here that's not being disclosed as part of this budget, but yet it supports both the town and the education
But it
budget.
will show up in their grants, like we're saying, if it doesn't come directly to the town. So I don't know if you're trying to get back to cutting education again, but he was very clear he's going to be using this money for non-operational items. That's what he said. And he clearly,
Because he thinks he can't use it for operational items, and
He's-
that's not true.
so if he decides to do what he said he was going to do, he needs programs. He needs summer programs. He needs to upgrade infrastructure in elementary schools. If he does what he said he was going to do, what is your point?
I don't believe that he can spend $1 million of ESSER grants and $2 million in this American Rescue Plan on those plans.
Well, how do you know that? How do you know that?
If he's doing that, then he's not actually using this in all of the different ways that.
That doesn't mandate that he uses it for that. He clearly outlined the items he wants to spend it on. So if you're saying that because it may show he can use it, he clearly said he's not going to use it for operational items. Because the 2% covers his operational items.
So we have $8 million potentially coming from the federal government, and we're going to reflect 1.1 in our revenue.
Well,
this year.
you're assuming he's not going to reflect it in his budget as far as a grant directly from the federal government or state.
That doesn't in any way impact what we're doing here today.
So why would we put it in this budget?
In the
if it
same
does-
way that we did the ESSER grant and the educational cost sharing.
Well-
Aren't they both
Yeah.
grants?
The ESSER clears through this budget. The new
Correct.
ESSER
Those are
clears
all-
through this budget.
That's the difference.
The other one does not. It's an outside grant.
We know
Doesn't
this for
clear
sure.
our budget.
Okay, all right.
So that's what we're trying to explain to you, Nancy. You know,
Okay.
I mean.
I thought you, 2 minutes ago, you said you didn't know, so.
No, we're trying to explain to you that I asked you to reread it because I knew that it was going directly there, unless the federal government changes it. You confirmed in rereading it that it goes, quote, to education agencies. So why would Ed and I put it in this budget if it goes directly to the education system?
I guess I'd point out, and maybe I'm not current on my information, but when this originally came out, one of the criticisms was that the money's going to the state for the state to allocate back out, and there was no guarantee over how much the towns were going to get. Now, that may have changed, but that was one of the original criticisms of this.
So, hey, you know,
The caveats, they're gonna attach to the money when they give it to you.
there are municipalities getting $50 and $60 million on this to education, directly to education.
Yes. No, I completely understand, but again, as a fraction of their total budget, that's still a relatively small number.
So, if things change and we find out that it goes through the town, then that'll be something we'll have to change. But right now, that's not the guidance that we're getting.
So at what point will we know about this county money?
On or about May 11th.
That's what I said earlier.
I said that earlier.
So how will that impact this budget? We will just simply not include it in whatever goes to the referendum?
So let's say on May 11th, we get guidance, okay?
Yep.
We know, and I'm going to repeat again, we know that the guidance right now is water improvements, sewer improvements, broadband improvements, lost revenue as it applies to building permit fees, grand list decline. The same guidance we know is going to come in place on the second round on the county. And I said it earlier. There could be additional guidance with specificity such that we may have to apportion it to 501(c)(3)s. We may have to set up a grant program here. This is what the federal government is talking about right now. It may be to restore the arts. The city of New Haven, I think, is looking at that right now. So there's a lot of speculation right now. So we have to wait. We can't put that in here. We don't even know if it's going to be $4,593,000 because they're going to recalculate the per capita formulas. So if it comes in, we will have to apply it to either projected lost revenue, sewer, water, broadband, or some of the other guidance that we're hearing. Some of the cultural aspects, the state's looking to increase tourism. That could be part of it too, that the municipalities may have to allocate money towards. So the safest bet is to not include it in this budget at any time until we get clear guidance on how it could be spent.
Clear guidance as to the amount and clear guidance to the caveats that are with it.
Right.
So-
And we were told, I was told point blank in a professional fashion, and a lot of us were, at CCM and some of our other executive board meetings. This is not to be used for pensions and not to be used to reduce taxes, reduce mill rates. And I'm going to be bullish on that. I'm going to keep repeating this, because we're not going to be put in a position here that we're going to have to do, we have to endure a federal audit, because Ed and I have to calculate and build. There's going to be, whether it be Excel sheets, we have to ensure that the money's going in the right places based on the guidance, which right now is somewhat arcane and a little bit ambiguous. But everybody across the state is in the same position on this. Many of us are grateful, particularly some of the larger cities, that they're getting so much more money.
If I could just add, again, from the same document, if you all want to look on page 231 and 232, it has use of funds A, B, and C to respond to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus 2019 or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality.
Did I not just say that? That's
B,
exactly what I said.
To respond to workers performing essential work during COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers. And then C, this is most important, for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such metropolitan city non-entitlement unit of local government, and that's us, or county due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to the revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year of the metropolitan city non-entitlement unit of local government or county prior to the emergency. So that means 2018-19, correct?
It's the fiscal year pre-pandemic.
Yes.
So
that means 2018-19.
So I gave a summarization of what you just read. I said a lot of what you just said. Mm-hmm. So you're sort of confirming.
So the last category is the water and sewer, which is what you started with. But what I'd like to emphasize is that this can be used to compensate for any losses that we have incurred, whether it be economic development, which you keep emphasizing all of the projects that you've lost out on because of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as those additional costs that we have incurred as a result of this pandemic, both this year
That's what
and next year.
Nancy, I said that so many times. Even at the last meeting, I talked to this group, and I talked about unbudgeted expenditures. You're
Yes.
repeating everything I've said.
Yes, so that it's not just sewers and water, but all of these other things that do definitely impact this budget.
So you're making it sound like I just said sewer and water. You just said it's not just sewer and water. I talked specifically about unbudgeted expenses in the last meeting, lost revenue due to grand list and building permit fees, interest income. I think I was pretty clear on what the usages
So
are.
it will cover many of our line items in the budget, correct?
It'll cover revenue losses. Yes, it will, in unbudgeted expenses, which is what I've been saying all along.
Yes.
You're just repeating everything I just said in this meeting and the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So you're confirming the points that I've been making, right?
I'm confirming that we are receiving revenue and that should actually impact both this current fiscal year and the next fiscal year, and it has to be based upon the 2018-19 budget.
So I've been saying the same thing. So you're repeating everything I've just said here tonight, at the last meeting, and even at some of the public meetings.
Okay. Well, again, I think that this is something that should be reflected in this budget as soon as possible, and as soon as you know, please let us know as well.
It is reflected in the budget.
No, what, well, the 1,170,000 is reflected in the budget. You saw that, right?
Yes. But I'm
Okay.
saying that the county money, this is a complete curveball to everyone in this room. An additional $4 million in revenue has a pretty significant impact, I would imagine, on our budget development.
Well, it wasn't a curveball to me, because all along I've been talking about county money. What none of us knew was what the per capita formulations are.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't
Yes.
even know if that's accurate.
Yes, I
So-
knew it was, I assumed that the $2.3 million actually was both. It was both the county and the local
No,
combination.
that was an incorrect assumption, because clearly, I've said it clearly, that there's another county pocket of money that's being determined in terms of who's going to get how much, based on per capita. But I want to repeat it again. There is a nebulous aspect to the per capita formula. The federal government's got to recalculate it and may go through it another 2 times. We may not know, at least until May 11th, whether it's $4,593,000. And if we do get it, then we will position it. We will position it to the public. But again, at this juncture, based on all of the people I talked to, the federal government, state government, and through all the affiliations that I'm part of, The guidance is specific to the items that we just talked about, with the possible exception of tourism, cultural, and some of the other things that are in this list. So we had to be very careful on how we do this.
So we
but
won't know until we actually receive the money, is that what you're saying?
we won't
On May
know,
11th?
we won't know what the guidance is, we think, until May 11th, and we may not know what the number is, at least until May 11th.
Because that's the very last day that we can receive the money, right? Because it has to be less than or equal to 60 days from the day that the act was put into place, which was March 11th.
So the federal government has told me that, and the state confirmed this, because our money as a non-entitlement city goes to the state and gets redistributed to the town. The state has been mandated by the federal government. Rosa DeLauro told me this personally, that that money will have to come and be sent to the municipalities by the end of May. So for the entitlement cities, those that are getting 10 times what we're getting, that's coming right from the federal government. So for us, the guidance to the state is get the money to the municipalities by May 30th.
Is there any other questions on this, the 21-22 budget? Michael?
Could, go ahead, Mike.
No,
please.
continue.
I just wondered if Ed could actually walk us through some of these changes.
Sure. If you take the first sheet, which would be the one that says Town of North Haven personnel budget reductions, the 333,840 was listed in the prior budget, and it was already taken out of the grand total. But as we said before, we couldn't disclose the detail until we had spoken with all these people in these positions. So this reflects the cost broken down by salary, FICA medical, deferred comp, and pension. So that budget, now they've been allocated to each of those different accounts. So that would bring us back to that last budget with these numbers allocated.
So in other words, the line by lines have been adjusted to include the 333 in those positions.
Correct, right. And that would also come off the total on, I think it's page 4, 5, or 6, one of those pages. Then after that, we had two different sets of additions. One was for...
Before you go any further.
Sure.
Is there a particular reason that these three positions were eliminated?
Because we felt we could work without them. One of them we've been working out without for close to a year,
Okay,
without any issues.
so there was just redundancy.
Right.
You know, redundancy may not be the right word. It's a matter of, when we look at any organization, I did this in my companies down through the years, we want to make sure that we're running as efficiently as possible on the inside and look for ways to drive efficiencies, but ensure that on the outside, our service model to our customers, our clients, in this case, our residents, are at the highest levels. So this budget shows a tremendous increase in public safety, technological upgrades on communication systems, but we're sort of redefining what we're doing on the inside. Ed's taking more responsibilities and in two of these three positions. So we're not replacing the positions. And we will run as efficiently on the inside as we did before.
The second page, Ed?
Yep. The first item, the number we had in the budget originally was 70 because we carried over last year's number, but that was just a pro-rata figure. After speaking with the police and fire chiefs, they said that the number would be, for the radio system maintenance and repair, $131,000. And that is to provide services, software upgrades, maintenance, et cetera, for the $4 million communications package that was installed several years ago. I'll skip the second one. The third one is the fire civil defense. There was a stipend omitted for the deputy chief, $3,600, so that was added in. And we were going to cut insurance a little, so just to make it simple, we reduced that by $64,600. So the bottom line of the budget expenditures didn't change at all. And then the last item, our 5-year capital plan additions. We had to put the town hall roof and windows in if we're going to try to use LoCIP money to handle these items, because it has to be shown in the budget somewhere.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, right there? That's one of the reasons right there.
That's it.
And in these windows here, when there's a storm, these windows shake, and that window blew out, this window blew out about 1.5 years ago. So we have to put this, as Ed said, in the capital plan.
And I think more important, one of the real important thing is, some of these windows you can't open and get out of,
Right.
which would be a problem in an emergency. And in addition to that, the last item was we're trying to work on moving the recycling and transfer station over to, I think it's 91T on Sacker Point Road. So we have to have that in here as well. It's not in the capital page 38, it's just in the 5-year capital plan.
What years are those items? Okay.
They're all put in
I'll
the current.
look.
They
I'll
just
find
need
it.
Yeah,
Just the current, just to get them in there.
They just need to be in the plan.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Because if you're gonna get a grant, they wanna see, are you really, do you have this in your budget somewhere? And I always put it in the capital plan, and they're good with that.
Anything else on the budget?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Mike, I think at your last meeting, you said that you could get us down to a 0 mill rate increase just simply with some of the revenue increases and economic development, and I think there were maybe 2 other things. I was wondering if you could just address that.
So this budget, as I said earlier, goes from 30.72 to 30.71. It's a negligible decrease. So you see the revenues in there, as Ed indicated earlier, Nancy, that we bumped up some items.
Yep.
Town clerk fees, he went through all that. And we do have the $1,170,000 in for this fiscal year, which basically allows us to bring it down to 30.71. So the federal stimulus will help with that. But also, we're increasing public safety, and the federal government likes the fact that we're increasing public safety and adding 2 new firefighters, 3 new police officers. So that was told to me right from the federal government. So the federal government will have no problem with us putting that money in there the way we have it. And in this case, it gets down to that slight decrease. So it's a combination of the increased revenues, where I think we're going to end up potentially incrementally on a grand list, but, you know, we've got a lot of projects that I'm working on that, and a combination of the federal stimulus that's in the budget.
Anyone else?
I have some questions.
Yes, Michael?
Yeah, first of all, the positions that were eliminated here, obviously, if anyone from the public looks at the Assistant Director of Finance being eliminated, there might be some concern. Now, Ed, aren't you working enough overtime? I mean, really, we want to give you the assistance you need. Is there another position that's replacing that, or are we subcontracting out more work, or what's happening there?
Mike, that position, a lot of the work we've had over the years had to do with some special projects between the fire department, the middle school.
Yeah.
And, you know, that took up a lot of time. But those projects are done and over with right now. So,
Have you been to Vanacore Field? I mean, whatever the town may
Well,
need down the road.
that's-
I'm sure
yeah.
needs are not going to end here tomorrow. But,
right. But for now,
what I'm saying is that you've accepted so many other tasks and duties from other departments that a position like this would seem to be pretty essential, especially if you want to take a vacation.
I take a vacation.
Yeah.
And don't forget, Mike, before that position was in here, I did handle this all myself before. 5, 6 years ago, there was no Assistant Director of Finance.
Yeah.
And right now, I've already reached out to some of the department heads, so they're,
Right. It arrived. I thought that was the relief that we were looking for.
right, but I'm also working with some of the department heads who've been helping me out with a few things too, so we'll get through it.
And every day, he and I, we work on the finances of this government. So we're very comfortable that that position can be eliminated in this budget.
Right, don't forget, my background's in public accounting. I've worked with a lot of clients and customers in different jobs, so juggling a lot of things has never been a problem. I mean, you just learn how to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so much Ellen can do. to help you out, but okay.
She's working overtime too.
Yeah, all right, I guess. That sort of, it was a red flag, that's all. Yeah, the medical insurance line for our town, and I want to thank the first selectman for setting up the meeting last month.
Welcome.
Because on March 30th, Tim and I did meet Zoom-wise with Brian Luciani of Blue Point, and later with Jay Fiorillo and Chuck Petrosione of Brown and Brown. And it was, the meeting was, I would say, helpful to let us know what the trends are in healthcare costs and what our reserve requirements might be down the road. I would say that we were a little disappointed with some of the confusion that occurred that day, because we didn't really get an update personally on the Board of Ed side. We just got 2 presentations on the town side that did not totally coalesce.
Well, there's a reason for that, Mike, and see, what's a little-known fact is this, okay? When we look at the retiree health insurance, neither agent has access to that information unless we give it to him, okay? So Ed, in his discussions with Brown and Brown, gave them the number. Blue Point didn't have it. Blue Point's numbers were totally accurate, with the exception of the fact that they didn't overlay because we hadn't told them what the retiree insurance was, and that was the difference, right, Ed?
The Medicare Advantage.
Medicare Advantage, right. So, in retrospect, once I heard what happened, we would have probably refocused Brown and Brown just to present Board of Ed, because Blue Point had already done the presentation, and we could have overlaid on top of that presentation the Medicare Advantage that we're just talking about, Ed and I.
Well, unless Brown and Brown spoke up, we would not have known that large expense, which I believe was around $900,000, was not included in Brian's numbers.
My point is, they didn't know it. They didn't know it. Ed told them. They would have never known it.
Well, Brian said that Blueprint does not handle the town retirees, and that Brown and Brown handles that part, or maybe that's managed independently by Ed. But I'm just saying that it added to a lot of confusion.
Right. What I understand, I agree. When I heard this, I said there's too much confusion, and if, in retrospect, we should have given Blue Point the same information we gave Brown and Brown, and we didn't. That was the discrepancy.
Yeah. Brown and Brown made an excellent presentation, though, with the slides, with the details, and with the reasoning, the specificity they were looking for. So, by all means, if you want to consolidate and go to one agency, we did like Jay and Company, and that's a recommendation I'll continue to make as long as I'm around.
Anything else, Michael?
Not specifically, but in general here, I guess I'm, well, but before I go any further, I was going to ask for a 10-minute recess to be able to caucus with Ms. Barrett here.
I have a motion, make a motion to recess. I'll second it.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nicer to get this information ahead of today, but we received it tonight, and we just want to be able to talk about it for a few minutes.
Well, I'll go along with that, but let me just say in the discussion, the motion in the second, that when you look at this budget book, all right, the only changes are the 3 positions that Ed just reiterated, the capital improvement items that Ed talked about, and a couple of items that we talked about with the stipend and with the technology. So there's not much difference. There's not much difference other than those items than what was in the previous budget book.
Yeah,
So there's not a lot of new data.
Right, and I want to discuss how how we might vote on what we have to vote on this evening.
all right.
The expense side did not basically change, but I have a motion, I second it, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're adjourned.
We're in recess.
We're in recess. We're in recess, we'd like to.
It's a little
we're in
different.
recess. We are back in session. Any other questions, Mike, you have anything else in the budget?
I defer to Ms. Barrett.
Tim, anything else?
I'll defer to Ms. Barrett as well.
Nancy, you had something else?
So, I'd like to just say, before we actually get into the details of this, I would really love to hear from the Republicans on this board, because, again, you're all able to talk in caucus, but this is really the only forum in which Mr. Callahan and I are able to hear from everyone, not just from Mr. Frieda, but from everyone about not only the budget that was presented last month, but the budget that's before us this month. And really, the people of North Haven that have elected us to serve their best interests, I think they also deserve to hear how people feel about this particular budget, and in particular about the mill rate that's being proposed.
I'm happy to speak.
Sure, please do.
So, Nancy, you went through in some detail some the various revenues we're getting from the federal government, and I guess just we'll start with the county for a moment, which was perhaps somewhere in the $4.9 million range, and I have to trust what I'm hearing from both Ed and Mike on the uses there, and I guess when I think about that, I say to myself, well, what's the greater sin? That we budget in revenues from the county, for instance, this county money, right? Only to find out later on that we shouldn't have done that, and we have to restore the money or give it back because of a grant order, because we simply have knowledge that we shouldn't use it for operations. I guess I weigh that against, maybe you're right. Maybe we find out down the road that we could have used some portion of this county money towards the budget. At worst, what we did was we deferred that till next year. And I guess when I've looked around various towns over the years, where they often get into trouble isn't necessarily on the expense side of the budget, it's often on the revenue side. They over budget the revenues, which tend to be more difficult to forecast than on the expense side. We've got the money that's coming in, it's the 170, which is in the budget for next year, and then the money that's coming in for this year will be in the budget for this year. And I guess that leaves the money that you talked about with Mike back and forth on the Board of Ed. Again, it's a lot of money. I understand what you're saying. But from what I can tell here, the money is going directly to the Board of Ed, and it is a grant. I watched the town meeting, as I know you did, at home that evening, and I heard Patrick speak about it. And so I heard his response when you re-asked the question tonight. I have to believe that what he says is right. They have their own attorney in the Board of Ed. They, I hope, would have read the regulations. So I'm loath to sort of overrule what I've heard publicly from the superintendent, what Mike has said, what Ed has said, and especially when we know one thing: the money is going directly to the Board of Ed on a grant. It's not coming through the general fund, for instance. So, look, I know when you talk about it and you start adding these up, you get some big numbers. I guess my other thought here is, when you get right down to it, there's a slight decrease in the mill rate here, and I guess what you might say, or perhaps Mike, is that it could be less, and certainly that would be a benefit to the taxpayers of the town of North Haven. However, I also think what's important to the taxpayers, and also to the residential taxpayers and the commercial taxpayers, is stability. And we've had remarkable stability here in the mill rate over Mike's tenure. He can quote for you, but there's been many years where we haven't even had a tax increase, where taxes stay the same, where we've even had a slight decrease. And to me, that's what brings businesses to town is certainty. That they would prefer a town that has a modest to no increase in the mill rate, rather than one that sort of ratchets up and ratchets down. I guess in the 1-year view, if taxes are going down, everyone's going to think that's great. I think it's great, you would, and everyone else would, right? So I think when I look at this budget, talking really just on the revenue side at this point, I'm happy with where we ended up, and I'm happy with, a very slight decrease in the mill rate. And I do understand your comments about the total dollars here, but we've sort of gone through the various buckets, and I'm accepting the discussion that we've had on those, and of course, some of it is going into the budget. Maybe not as much as others might like, but I'm happy with where we ended up on that side.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, sir.
You're welcome to speak
Yeah, I'll
or
speak.
not.
So I'm gonna start with Board of Ed first, because I keep hearing programs, and while, discussion about programs, what does that mean? In this particular time, with children's remote, and I know lots of teachers, not necessarily in North Haven, they've been challenged to try to teach remotely. So when Patrick was talking about summer programs, there's probably a good percentage of children that didn't get what they needed, especially at the elementary level, where it's really important, and that's where the basis comes into play, being in person, that those are the types of programs he's looking to supplement for these children, because let's face it, all the kids are behind in some regard, and it's gonna carry them through even in college. It's affecting colleges as well. So he said programs. We talked about that. I remember asking him, that's what that says to me. As far as the elementary schools, they're all old, and the ventilation, I see I see your point, totally see your point. But we can't put it in here because it's not ours, it's not coming to ours, as far as we know, that's what's been stated. We have to trust in our superintendent, and what he said is what he wants to do. I firmly believe that he's probably going to need a lot of programs to catch children up. And that's gonna follow them, and the ventilation and other things, I think he made a good pitch when he brought those. As far as the town side, I trust Ed and Mike. If we can't put it in there, we can't put it in there, and I agree what Tim said. We can't put something in there that we shouldn't be doing. We don't know the revenue, what it's gonna be. If we over budget, and I have a friend who's on a board like this in another town, they don't get the services that we do, they don't get a lot of what we do, and they've gotten into trouble so many times by overextending the numbers. And based on where we started and our meetings and what we don't always get along when we're on the side, when we're together. We go back and forth, and we challenge each other, for sure.
Yep,
We do. And I'll say I have a different perspective, especially on things, based on my job and whatever, but we all respect each other. There is that back and forth. Don't think that it's all rosy, because it's not. But I'm comfortable with what we did. We compromise, we talk about it. Sometimes we sway each other's opinion, by factual information. I think this is the best that we can do right now. We can't put those other monies in there because we're not really supposed to, and that's how other towns get in trouble. And I look at the services we have and where we are in our mill rate and other towns that don't have these services. I think we're doing a really good job, and I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you, Diane. The cute thing is everything Tim said, and even to some of the things Diane said, Michael's been saying for months in meetings, in town meetings, and these board meetings. And you've had towns like West Haven and Hamden that over budgeted in years past. They were gonna get an extra $1 million they put in their budget for COVID, or West Haven was having problems. We don't do that.
So if I could,
Deal with the facts.
if I could weigh into
Sure.
that point, and what happens when they do that, they underfund pensions because it's such a huge obligation in the budget, so they've got to figure out how to make up for the revenue that they put in that they're not going to get. So my position here is, I'm going to be very candid with everybody. So my job, as I see it, is to service the tax-paying citizens with the highest possible service model. And my staff does the same thing, Valerie and Tammy. Tim made a point, is exactly what Amazon said to me several years ago. Mike, we like the fact that you have a lot of financial stability here. They like the fact that I came from a business background. That was critically important from them. They don't see that. They don't see financial stability in municipalities, and they won't go to certain municipalities if they see this instability. And so when Tim talks about businesses, they want the stability. We've got a stable mill rate right here. We're not going to, in my view, we should not overestimate revenues and do things that put the town in a dangerous position. On a personal note, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, okay? I have relationships all across the state and the federal government on both sides of the aisle. If I see something that I perceive to be political games being played, I have a very low tolerance for it. And sometimes what we see in government is politics enter into what we try to do and be as a good government. And as was said about me at a statewide meeting, here's a man that's on speed dial with not only the leading Republicans in the state, but the leading Democrats. And government needs to have a good working relationship across the aisle to get things done to serve the constituents. So when I see, if I see political games being played, then my competitive personality comes out. So we, I think, are doing the right things here. The rating agencies like us an awful lot. The auditors think we're doing everything right. But we're not going to get reckless in what we do from a financial management standpoint.
Thank you, Michael. If there's nothing else,
Oh, no,
go ahead.
Sure, of course. So I'd like to thank everyone for weighing in, because I think it's really important for all of us to be able to hear, what you're thinking and the types of interactions that you have. So thank you again for doing that. Again, I think the people at home need to understand, and we're all in the same boat here, that both last month and this month, we came to the Board of Finance meeting and were presented with the most recent version of the budget at the meeting. So that makes it very, very difficult to actually not only absorb the new information, but also process it and analyze it in a way that allows us to actually uphold the oath of our office. So it really has been a significant challenge, and I understand there have been lots of curveballs and the revenue side of the budget in a state of flux, but it really has made it significantly difficult to actually present some coherent ideas and suggestions. And certainly when the last version of the budget was presented to us along with that 2-page list of changes, again, there was no real discussion among everyone in this group. Certainly the Republicans met in caucus, and you were able to put together that 2-page list of changes. Most were declinations, but there was one increase as well. But it was simply inculcated into the budget, with really very little discussion. And last month, both Mr. Hallahan and I tried to make additional changes. And for the most part, they were heard, absolutely, and we appreciate being heard, but I think it's also part of our job to actually deliberate on the suggestions that are made, not just listen to them and then vote on a number. And again, I'm turning to the people who have served on the Board of Finance for a long time. I'd like to hear whether there has ever been a time where the 3 numbers that the Board of Finance vote on in the March Board of Finance meeting are not the 3 numbers that are reflected on page 39 of the budget packet at the public hearing. Because it seemed like at the last minute, there were these last minute changes to the numbers that we voted on to actually reflect this $333,000 change, as well as the change in the insurance. And it was like you were changing the bottom line figures without a discussion of the line item changes. And that's the equivalent to like going to the doctors, stepping on the scale, and telling the medical assistant, the number you're about to write down, could you take 15 pounds off of that? And if they ask you why, tell them, oh yeah, I'll tell you next month. And that's basically what we were told. We're going to vote on these 3 numbers, and we can't really discuss the $333,000 change. So in my mind, if it's not in the packet, the budget packet as a line item, and we're not openly discussing it at a Board of Finance meeting, it should not be reflected in the bottom line. And it certainly shouldn't be presented as if all of us are supporting those numbers to the public.
Are you talking about just the
The
333, Nancy?
333 was in the budget since March. It just wasn't identified as to what the positions were. That's always been in the budget.
No, absolutely
No?
not. No, absolutely
There
not.
wasn't a line item below the thing that identified
At the public hearing,
and
At the public
discussed that it was personnel issues personnel that would be
that would be
reduced.
discussed in the following month. Yes.
That's this month.
So
I
you-
understand, but at the time that we had to vote on it, we had no idea what it was referring to.
So
As I
but-
said, it's like plucking a number out of thin air
We
and saying,
we vote on a budget that the administration presents to us as to what their needs are. The administration's needs was 333,840 less in personnel, and they told us that, and they did not identify the personnel until the personnel were informed.
so then it
So
should not have
what
been
is the
included
question?
in that version of the budget, which is in fact what Mr. Frieda said. He would not include it in that version of the budget, and of course, the number that we all voted on did include it.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest with you, but your issue is a 333, and we clearly stated we can't identify the components of it, but we guaranteed it would be 333, so why not disclose it to the public? The
You
330
you can't disclose it, but it should be
No,
disclosed.
we
Is that
can't
your argument?
disclose the people involved with the 333.
Then you should not include it in the budget. It's a
disagree.
version of the
No, I
budget.
disagree, because that's lack of transparency. We want the public to know what the plan is, and we committed to 333,000. We couldn't mention the people's names out of fairness to them. I'm sorry, I disagree with
It
you.
should not be included
I
in the budget.
disagree.
Well, you can disagree all you
Yeah,
like,
well-
but if you're not going to disclose it publicly at a Board of Finance meeting, then it should not be included in the budget. It can be in the next version.
We disagree. I'm sorry. We're not going to, we're going to put it in to show the public what our plans are, and we were clear that we could not identify the people because they hadn't been spoken to yet. And we're going to continue to be transparent here. We're going to tell the people what the real-time information is, and that's what we did.
That's not real time.
It is real,
That-
it was, because it's real time, because Ed and I knew it was 333,000. So why not tell the public? Why-
That's not real time
Yeah,
then.
I disagree
That's
with you.
saying, in the future, this is what it's going to be. But in the
Look,
current moment, that's not what it is.
You're entitled to your
It's different
opinion.
versions of the budget.
We disagree with you, okay?
Okay, so I have actually some comments to make, and I actually have some suggestions for cuts to the budget, which I would like to hear people's feedback on, not just have me listen to it. So again, in terms of big picture, we are facing a flat grand list currently. Economic development has been not what we had hoped it had been for the last year, through no fault of Mr. Frieda's. He is undoubtedly working very, very hard, but it really has not panned out to the level that we had hoped to date. It could change later in the spring, but as far as where we all we can do is work with what the information we have now. So I think we need to be very, very careful and responsible about establishing expenditures that will be the foundation for subsequent years when we do not have tons of federal funds apparently falling from the sky in our laps, $8 million to be exact. So I think we need to focus on both the expenditures as well as the revenue. So I have a couple of different things that I'd like to point out. And again, the order that I'm addressing this in is simply based upon the order of magnitude in our budget. So anyone that knows me knows that I have been a staunch supporter of education for over 25 years. And last year, the Board of Ed received an increase to the budget. They had asked for $2.9 million, and the Republican members of this board reduced it by $200,000. If you look at that proportionately, this year they're asking for an additional, on top of that $2.7 million that they got last year, an additional $1.1 million. If we were to reduce their budget by $100,000, originally I had said $2, but if we reduce it by just $100,000, that's in that same ballpark percentage reduction. And again, I'm not saying this because I don't support education. I am saying this because the education budget will be substantially enhanced by federal funding. And by that, I mean the coronavirus relief, which is listed in our packet as $336,000, ESSER 1 at $214,000, ESSER 2 at almost $1 million, and then ARPA American Rescue Plan Act of $2 million. So again, since the town cut $1.3 million, I think it's only fair that the Board of Education also should do their part. Everyone has to do their part. And that $1.3 million reduction represented a 35% reduction on the town side increase. So, so that would be one suggestion. And again, as I know Diane has pointed out as well, if you look at the administrator salaries, just the top 2 administrators have a $30,000 increase for the Board of Ed side. So, and I think that, again, one place that we could find that $100,000, if you look in the budget for the Board of Ed, is on the line item called Salary Reserve, which for whatever reason has been bumped from $34,000 up to $135,000. And again, this is something that could be supported by subsection R of the American Rescue Plan Act. So we could cut $100,000, it would have no impact on student services, and ultimately, I believe that it could be, we could use the federal funding to replace it. In terms of the next large department expenditures, I'm looking at the fire department, and again, at the public hearing, there was some confusion about the number of fire engines that are being requested. I think Mr. Frieda thought that it was only 1 fire engine, but it was number 2 fire engine. And in fact, the fire chief is asking for 2 fire engines. And it says leased, but in reality, these are 2 financed purchases. And the $120,000 that's in next year's budget is really just the down payment. What we're really talking about is a $1.5 million expenditure for these 2 fire trucks. And again, if you really look at the ages of the current fire engines that the career firefighters use, meaning the engine and ladder at career headquarters, as well as the rescue vehicles, as well as the recently refurbished engine at Monowese, those are all relatively new, almost brand new fire engines, and I think that we could go with just 1 rather than 2, which is I think what Mr. Frieda seemed to be happy with. Again, I think, as I mentioned before, in terms of the 2 firefighters, we've never committed to 2 firefighters per year for 4 years. What we said was, several years ago, we're going to start with 2 and each year evaluate. And again, I think we need to be very cautious, as I pointed out before, the impact on contractual replacements of increasing two firefighters and potentially 3 policemen. I think that this is something that could literally break the bank for this town. And again, in terms of the police department, as I mentioned before, I had talked about the salaries, and that our new police chief, Chief Glenn, seems to be paid the same, actually now is going to be paid more than his predecessor. And that one decision has started this avalanche of other decisions, including increasing the fire chief's salary as well as the director of finance's salary. And again, Mr. Frieda has talked about this in terms of parity, but it's really not parity. I mean, we're talking about 136, 137, and 144. So that to me doesn't seem like parity, and there are other department heads with the same amount of tenure, with the same amount of responsibility in our town, such as Lynn Sadowski, who have not received such an increase. So again, I think that I could save the town $30,000 there. And last but not least, in terms of the police department, the police chief has requested 3 police officers. And again, I certainly support our police department, but I think we have to be very careful about, not only from a contractual replacement standpoint, but also in terms of meeting the needs of our community, these types of investments. And the reason that Chief Glenn gave for adding 3 additional police officers, patrolmen in particular, is 2 reasons. One is personal property crimes, in particular car break-ins, and 2, crimes on Universal Drive. And so I would just like to say, and Mr. Frieda actually made this point, and I completely agree with him, in terms of the personal property crimes, many of these break-ins are being perpetrated by minors. And so even if we had 200 police officers and every one of these individuals were being caught and brought to justice, they're back on the street as a result of the legislation that allows them to be released the next day. And so it really doesn't seem like the hiring of additional police officers would do anything to actually impact that particular crime statistic. And as far as crimes on Universal Drive, I made the suggestion that the police department actually cooperate with many of the big national stores that are on Universal Drive and work together with the security officers to have an additional presence, particularly in the parking lot. And I think this is not trying to replace police officers with security guards. That's not my intention at all. They have different training, different responsibilities, but it is very similar to what's happening in our own high school, in which the police officer, who is a school resource officer, and the supernumerary, and the security guard have different responsibilities, but they present a coordinated effort. And I think the same thing could be true on Universal Drive. And then the cost of additional presence isn't solely borne by the taxpayers of North Haven. So I think that all of those things could result in significant reductions to our town budget. And again, I think that at a time when people are really financially hurting, that we cannot be giving away $10,000 and $12,000 and $17,000 salary increases when people are out of their jobs, when they're struggling to actually pay their taxes, when they're taking advantage of the additional grace period to pay their taxes, and some will actually go into the next month and be incurring fees because they just can't be paying those bills. So I just think that in terms of how we best use the taxpayer money, I think that we have to be very careful about the expenditure side and also be realistic about the revenue side. So I'd love to hear what anyone has to say about any of these suggestions.
Did you have any other reductions you wanted to propose?
I didn't hear a number for some of the reductions. I don't see Nancy.
Sure, be happy
You talked
to.
about some of them, but,
So the Board of Ed was $100,000.
right.
The fire engines, again, it's $1.5 million for 2, so I'm going to assume that that's a $750,000 savings.
Well, the item is only, as you pointed out, the lease payment, which is $120, I believe is what I saw
Well, it's a
here.
down payment, so let's be very clear.
No, it's a lease, but nevertheless, the number for the
It's a
budget is-
financed purchase at 2.7
But we can't
or
cut
8%
$1 million
per month.
out when it's not even there. It's only
Right,
$120.
okay, so let's say $60,000.
Okay, 60.
$60,000 saved this year, but then, of course, next year it balloons up to $300,000. So again, I'm trying not to just look at a single year at a time.
I understand your point.
but
I'm just trying to understand your
looking
numbers as
into
well.
the future. And also, with respect to the fire chief's increase, again, the vaccinations will end this year, hopefully, knock on wood. And so his additional role in facilitating that, I'm assuming, will end this year.
No, it won't, because he's oversees the Emergency Operations Center. He's involved with the Fire Training Facility, be working with Scott Martis on that. He's the Emergency Management Director. He's taken on a lot more responsibilities.
But the emergency management of the vaccines will be done.
The Emergency Management Director in general, the town, any emergencies that happen, he's the lead guy, and he's my designee. He is responsible for being involved with all emergency management decisions in the town.
Right, but that has never changed. Why is that any different?
He's taken on more responsibilities in that.
Okay.
So we want to hear the rest of your numbers.
So $60,000 for the fire engine. In terms of the salaries, again, that would be about, if you just look at the increases, it would be another, say, $30,000 or $40,000. And in terms of the police officers, it's a little tricky to actually figure out the cost because in the employment table, you have the costs for, this year and next year for everyone.
Right.
So
it's
how
not-
many policemen would you?
So
like to
I'm
eliminate?
recommending only 2 police officers rather than 3.
So you want to eliminate a police officer?
Not eliminate a police officer, just only increase it by 2 in the same way that we've been increasing the fire department by 2. Because again, we did not hear from the police chief. I don't really have a sense for, what their overall, schedules look like and whether that means, 1 person per week or 1 person per 3 days. I'm not exactly sure.
You do realize that the scope of the police department goes beyond North Haven. You do realize that in the shooting in Branford, as an example, our police officers were out there in terms of regional SWAT teams, accident reconstruction teams. So if there's an accident in East Haven, a severe accident, we're part of the mutual aid process.
Right, and those towns are also involved in our town,
So
I would imagine.
They are, but
And the size of our town hasn't changed in terms of number of residents. right?
but the scope of our town has changed in terms of calls for service.
Nancy, what else did you have?
And I had one question, actually, because again, this could be a savings, but I just didn't understand it. The part-time dispatchers went from $60,000 to $80,000. Any idea what?
Did we, I don't recall if we added a dispatcher or not.
I think there's 4 dispatchers, because I didn't see the number change in the employment table, but it went from $60,000 to $80,000, and I wasn't sure why.
Well, we did add dispatchers, that's definite.
That's it.
Okay, you took over 911.
Here.
As Ed's looking at, did you have any other reductions?
I think that's it. That's it.
Okay. Well, education, 100,000. If you remember, because I know you were on for the meeting, Ms. Boemi even suggested, was it 20,000 or 100,000? She made the same comment.
200.
200,000. And the superintendent was adamant that he could not deal with that. And I have no problem when a superintendent gives us a reasonable budget that we grant his request.
Because last year, he said that he could handle the $200,000.
Well, what was the reason for the 200,000? I don't remember last year.
Insurance.
The insurance changed.
It was
so the insurance
non-educational. We
changed.
took it out of insurance, and the Board of Ed agreed
It's a
with it.
number we give them.
Right.
And as far as modifying their salaries, you do realize we have no control over how
Oh,
they spend the
I
money.
totally understand. I
Okay.
totally understand.
So,
But I'm
and
just
and
saying
last year,
that-
you bring up last year's, and you're right, I think it was insurance that changed. We give them that number to plug.
Right.
If, as the budget evolves, that number changes.
That's what
We
happened.
adjust it accordingly.
Right.
And that would happen a few years before that, too, when I think we had a drastic change in insurance.
So that's what it was. It was insurance.
And, as far as equipment for the firefighters, that the paid department has relatively new engines, well, the volunteers respond and they require the same level of safety and equipment, I would think, that our pay staff does. So I'm not comfortable in not giving them the same thing we would give anybody responding to a fire.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Ed, if my recollection is right, the other lease, which is in the budget for next year, that's our last payment,
That's
right?
our
That's
last
right.
payment.
So we won't have that 211 payment in.
So we
it's on
have a
page-
September payment
Hold on a
of this
second,
year
Nancy.
and next year.
It's on page 38, Ed.
So next
the-
year.
The 211 for the ladder truck lease, which is not the one Nancy's talking about, that's our
No, I know.
existing one. I believe that's our last payment.
The
That's
211 has one more payment in 2023.
Okay, so we have.
So if you look on page 47, I carried it out.
Oh, okay.
Are you sure about that, Ed?
Yeah, we checked that, didn't we? Al?
I think the fire chief included that in his packet, too.
Yeah, it's definitely this year, but if I
Yeah, you
recall
do
looking
show
at it, one more payment was the 2023.
Two more payments.
And as far as reducing one police officer, I mean, I think his whole reason behind it was he was increasing personnel on shifts. So just like the fire department, you'd be down a shift. The police
So there
have
were
rarely
three, there were
come
three
to
shifts?
us.
I don't actually know.
Well, they work 8-hour shifts, so 8, 16, 24. 3 8-hour shifts. they don't work 24-hour shifts.
Right. So
So
we
it
can
probably needs
increase
even more
one
than
person
three.
on one shift on one day.
It sounds like that's what his intention is. We can ask him more information about it, but that's kind of where he's headed.
Right, I just didn't hear from him sort of the specifics of
And,
what.
and the
what he-
fact that if it's someone breaking into someone's car,
Mm-hmm.
if we could curtail it, why would we not to? Because it's a young person, he's gonna be back out on the street. That doesn't make any sense to me
No,
whatsoever.
I think the point that Mr. Frieda made was
that's
that
what you
this,
said,
this is a solution that will be made through legislation as opposed to manpower.
But that doesn't mean we can't demonstrate to the residents that we're trying to help the residents.
Oh, absolutely, and I think
know,
hiring
And
two police
demonstrate to the
officers
people that
accomplishes
are doing
exactly
it,
that.
that we have people that are gonna respond.
You know, Nancy, I mentioned at the last meeting that I get a lot of feedback from residential real estate agents. And North Haven, this is a quote, is hot right now. People want to move in. They want to move in because of education, financial stability in the government, outstanding services, and a commitment to public safety. Now, I know this wasn't your intention when you were going through these cuts, but you just described cutting back education and public safety. I got to tell you, that's not a good optic. You know, we pride ourselves in this government on public safety, education, and a stable mill rate.
Right.
So I'm not inclined to cut public safety and education in town when I know for a fact that people like the education system here, and people like the fact that our response times and our amplification of public safety through resources, through new hires, and through updated equipment and technology and updating some of these trucks. We get a lot of correspondence that people's lives, they feel their lives are saved because of our public safety. So what you've just described, you're looking at it from a numbers standpoint, what you've just described is the antithesis of this government. Pro-education, pro-public safety, and outstanding service models.
Well, this year and last year were the only 2 years, in my recollection, that the Board of Education got exactly what they asked for.
That's not
basically.
correct.
And I provided you all with a spreadsheet that showed you exactly that. And again, I'm only saying that because they are getting all of this federal money.
Right.
It would never be my intention to make any cuts to education that would negatively impact the educational experience.
You do not know exactly what they're getting it, how they're getting it, when they're getting it, what the conditions of it are.
So let's stay on this for a second, because
Sure.
your point assumes that the school system's going to use it for operational activities, and he clearly said he wasn't. He was going to spend the money on things that are needed, like we spoke about earlier. Increased infrastructure, greater technology. Diane talked about children being disenfranchised, updated computers. He outlined all this. And one of the big things is ventilation systems. He's using that money. In effect, I can make an argument that that money is going to reducing the taxpayers' expenditures and liability in later years for things we would have needed anyway.
We'll see. Remains to be seen, right? We don't know what he's going to use it for.
We do know what he's
exactly.
going to use it for.
We shall see. And because he doesn't know exactly how much he's going to get and exactly when he's going to get it, right?
So he's going to use it for things that aren't in his operational budget, that are things that we'd have to address through this board, their requests in future years.
Right.
So it's no different than what we did creating a surplus for them and giving them the money back. And I talked about it time and time again back then, that when Common Core came in, there was roughly a $355,000 surplus for the Board of Ed. I had worked it out with the superintendent, Bob Cronin. We'll give you the money back. They used the surplus to pay and upgrade computers and laptops for the children that were going through Common Core. That would have been an expense that this Board of Finance would have had to seen in a subsequent year.
Yep. I provided everyone with that information. That was 1 year. Yes, I agree with you. And that's another source of funding that I forgot to mention for the Board of Education is an additional $850,000 that they have at their disposal, some of which have to be limited to capital expenditures and some is completely at their discretion. So again, I think that the town has taken a 35% cut to the proposed initial recommended increases to the budget, and the Board of Ed is taking a zero hit. So again, when people are hurting, I think that we deserve to really look very carefully at can we give the people of North Haven a mill rate decrease?
The town's taking 35% cut, but I can make an argument we're enhancing services. We're enhancing services by adding public safety, improving equipment. We've added dispatchers. We've enhanced the robust nature of our 911 emergency dispatch. So, and I said it earlier, we look for efficiencies in this government. And the 35% that you're referring to, we're going to move forward in this coming fiscal year by offering the residents more services, even though we did that here. I think that's prudent financial management, looking at how we can pare back 35% of the town side and still enhance the service model.
Nancy, did you have any other suggestions?
My suggestion is that we try to find a way to reduce the mill rate further.
Would you like to put your suggestions in the form of a motion? If you want to change something in the budget, you have to make a motion to change it. So,
Okay?
I mean, it's, you have the right to do it, and I'm not going to not let you have the right. So if you'd like to make those changes, make a motion, to cut education 100,000, reduce a police officer, whatever,
Okay.
and then we'll take a vote on it.
Do you want me to do it one at a time or all at once?
I'm sure we can do it unless anyone objects.
We're
we
not going
can-
to have 5 or 6 motions here, right?
So do it as one
One
motion.
motion,
Do it as one motion, please.
Okay, so the various changes that I've made to the Board of Ed, reduce it by $100,000. The fire department reduce the purchase of only one engine rather than two, which is a savings of $60,000. Reduce the police, fire, and director of finance salaries by the incremental increase, which is about $30,000. And also reduce the increased number of police officers from 3 to 2.
I think we need more specificity there, right? I don't think that's the kind of motion we can entertain. I mean, it's got to be something which says that you want to reduce the budget by X dollars. I mean, the police, I know the police is a tough number to get to.
Well, that's, right.
But we can't just say we're going to reduce the police from 3 to 2. That's,
So actually, the only number that's really missing is police, correct? Mm-hmm. Ed, police officer, maybe 85,000 with
Overall,
benefits?
with
All-
everything. In that ballpark, yeah.
Okay,
okay, so what's
so
that?
that's 80, that's 85 then. So 160, 190, 270. So about, 275. I'd make a
So-
motion to reduce the budget by $275,000.
In accordance with your list of education, fire
Yes.
department, police, and the engine.
Yes.
Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
I have a second. Any further discussion?
Wait,
Oh,
sure. I want to understand what we're saying here.
She made a motion to reduce the budget by 275, and there's no other discussion. The board's going to vote on it right now.
So, but you have a motion and a
I have
second.
a motion and a second.
Right.
I've asked for discussion. There was no further discussion.
So my discussion is I don't support reducing education and public safety.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Although,
Although I support the spirit of what she's trying to do, because she does want to make a great contribution toward the thriftiness of this town, I would have a problem on the police side, so I'm going to vote against it, but I do want to thank you very much for the time you put in to
Certainly.
try to find
Thanks.
cuts that
So,
will help.
let's finish
the
the vote.
taxpayer.
Let's finish the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Nays have it. Motion fails. Having said that, if there's no other discussion, I like to read.
Well, sir, I just want,
Yes.
I just want to state that in advance here, that it's hard to vote against a zero increase budget, but, there's always a but. On a note here, I would just request from the finance department that if this ever happens again, could we have 48 hours, just 48 hours of what we're supposed to vote on in a given meeting, whenever it's possible.
All
So,
right. Good, I'm sorry, finish your statement.
I do understand the changing numbers, the amount of discussions that have to take place, and the information that was coming in the last 48 hours. Because I Nancy and I, we independently did our own research too, up to the very end. But I just believe that in this situation, there were numbers you could have put together, that could have been put together on Friday that weren't much different than the ones that were put together on Tuesday. But only you would know that. Only you would actually know the truth of that. But please, in the future, please bring some order to us so we can just facilitate a more efficient discussion, because we're learning things tonight that we could have learned the last 2 days, and the meeting might not have run quite as long.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you a question first.
Yeah.
The exchanges on the expense side, those three items, the 333,000, and those few items that ended up in a zero, you had a problem digesting it in today's meeting?
The questions are not always what is being done with the changes in the budget. It's what items you decided not to change in the budget.
Well, that was last month. You could have
No,
changed whatever you wanted
no,
last
the
month.
whole income side was not.
I'm said expense, we're
open to
talking
discuss.
expense first.
Right.
Is there anything on the expense side that you felt you weren't capable of handling when it was given to you tonight? Those three items, the three salary positions, which we all knew about.
Yeah.
And
No,
the
no,
few
no.
little housekeeping things.
Not really, no,
Okay.
the uncertainty was
Expense
on-
side.
no.
Michael, go back, every year, we've been on this board together for 14 years or more. How often do we not get those revenue
It
numbers?
comes at the last
to
minute.
the last
It comes at
minute
the
from the
last
state?
minute, but the last minute, give or
Okay.
take a couple days.
And as Tim made clear, towns usually do not get in problems on the expense side because they can control it, and that's what we were controlling. The revenue side, we're subjected from whatever the state gives us, whatever the federal government gives us,
Yes.
and they give us the
Yes.
information.
I'm
It
familiar
always
with the
seems like in the ninth
limitations,
hour. There
Correct.
there were years, if you remember, we didn't get the numbers till right before the referendum or after the referendum.
Right, yes. there-
And we took our best educated guess.
I'll
So-
put it another way. I can remember when we used to get a document from OPM, okay, which laid out the revenues that we were getting, and we used to use that, and this is way back in time, but you were on the board, Mike.
Yep.
And we used to use that to set the budget. That hasn't happened in about a dozen years.
Because they don't,
Yeah, they stopped giving us some notification, but there were some published sources in this
So-
situation here. But, okay,
we're
anyway.
all getting
I've
we're
said-
getting the information in as timely a manner as we can present it.
Okay,
Revenue's always been something that's been in flux that the state gives us at the last minute. And I don't think that's ever changed. I don't think it's ever going to change. But having
Yeah.
said that,
all right, so I just, ahead of time, I just want you to know that although we have a 0% increase, the sources of funds, the amount of funds coming to this town from, it just seems to be enough where this would have been the year for a tax decrease. Very slight, but it would have been the year. The Board of Ed's going to get over $1 million a year for the next 2 years. As much as the superintendent says it's for things outside of his existing budget, the guidelines regarding education uses of these funds is very loose on the education side. Very loose, unbelievably ambiguous, hiring and retaining teachers, a whole bunch of stuff. But I can't believe that none of his line items could have been compensated by the revenues he's getting there outside the budget. But that's, you've already made your point on that. We're taking him at his word, or what he believes at this point with the information he knows. And with the needs that he knows, that he has not really specified specifically to us, to be redundant. So in addition to those other, to that, there's other allocations that Board of Ed has received totaling about $1.5 million. And their carryover surplus from last year, capital and operation-wise, $800,000. They're going to run a surplus this year. The town's getting $1.7 million, $1.17 million per year for the next 2 years as a non-entity municipality. And we're going to receive $4.5 million because we're part of New Haven County. And I know about the great limitations or the guidelines on this right now, but it just seems that between all of those factors and the fact that we are going to charge the taxpayer, I think only about $300,000 more additionally this year than last in terms of direct tax dollars. That could have been a reduction right there. There could have been ways to scale it back just a slight bit. But I want to say that that I understand the hesitancy and the concern that the First Selectman and the Finance Director have because of the lack of clarity on the usage of these funds. And so anyway, you can vote in favor of it. I could say this would have been the year for the tax cut. That's all. Thank you very much.
I have a quick question. At this point, Ed, what do you think the surplus will be?
I think we'll end up balancing this budget this year, and depending on how much money from the federal money that we put into this budget, we could show a surplus.
Yeah, let me rephrase it, Ed.
Yeah.
We don't know. We really don't know what the surplus will be because we still have the last week in April and May and June. And sometimes in June, revenues come in a little bit higher than we anticipated, so we really don't know. And I'm reluctant to issue a number because we really don't know. But what we do know is this budget will be balanced. So.
Well, it'll be a big number because actually the first payment of those federal funds will be received this year and recorded as revenue, which will throw into the fund balance and then draw on the year after this.
Let's not forget, we've been running behind all year.
Yes.
That's right.
We talk every month, we talked again this month, about the numerous categories here that are running behind. So
The projects that didn't get out of the ground, the projects that didn't get onto the grant list, the building fees we didn't receive because those projects didn't start because of COVID.
Yeah.
if it wasn't for this $1,170,000 and they built, the fact that we still have some MRSA money left, who knows where we would end up? So I don't think it's gonna be big at all, Mike. We may have a surplus that Mike and Ed will have to stay on top of that.
So I'm reluctant to give
I
it,
don't see it being-
I'm reluctant to
I
give a
don't think
number.
so. I think it'll be a sizable surplus this year.
Well, it
Very
might be,
sizable.
but
I don't think so.
that'll help us. If that's the case, that'll help us. So,
So what fraction of the money that we will be getting this May do you think you'll be able to use this year?
well, the most we can use is $1,170,000,
No,
which is
I
in the budget.
understand. But you said there were all these restrictions, so you're not sure
So
how much you can use.
So we would use it towards a building permit fee deficit, which
Mm-hmm.
we don't know what the deficit's going to be, because we got 9 weeks more of building permit fees to
Sure.
collect.
Actually, we talked about this, Mike, I
Yes, we
think
did.
last month. What you said was permits and fees were down $878.
Right.
Grant list growth was, I think, another $344. That's basically your number right there. That's the $1,000,001 right there.
So,
Yeah.
So you will be able to use all 1.1 million this year, you think?
provided that the building permit fee line item straight lines out to a deficit that I'm projecting. If we all of a sudden we get in 1 week $200,000 worth of building permit fees, and that's why I'm reluctant to give a number. But we have up to $1,170,000 to spend against lost revenue.
Right.
Yeah, that's why he asks each and every company, what are you doing after July 1st? Could you put it on the next year?
And by the way, I'll conclude my comments tonight with this. When I reviewed with the federal government at the 3rd Congressional District Office level, how we were planning to apply that $1,170,000, they thanked me. They thanked me for the clarity and specificity of it. And again, building permit fees, differential and grand list decline, applied towards lost revenues on other items.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of, of the 4 options, only 2 of them are applicable to us on a regular basis.
And I was very clear that
Yeah.
we have no intentions of sewer line improvements right now because we already have that ability through the WPCA. And broadband, I brought another company in, they're already starting to lay fiber at their expense. So why would I spend federal stimulus money on something that I can get a utility company to do? And the federal government liked that explanation.
I think if there's enough blowback, that they might expand some of the purposes. But anyway, it's okay. One thing, one day at a time.
Okay, very good.
One budget at a time.
I will call the questions.
All right.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends the town government budget for fiscal year 2021-2022 in the amount of $53,383,064. Can I have a second to that resolution?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm voting no.
Nancy, I didn't hear your vote. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the amount again? Can you just read that again for me?
$53,383,064. I didn't hear your vote.
And that's for the town side, and I'm going to vote yes for the town.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends a Board of Education budget for fiscal year 2021-2022 in the amount of $58,470,730. Can I have a second to that resolution?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Resolved that a total budget for fiscal year 2021-2022 in the amount of $111,853,794, government of $53,383,064, Board of Education $58,470,730, be presented at the annual budget town meeting to be held on Monday, May 10th, 2021. Can I have a second to that resolution?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No.
And I make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you,
All in
everyone,
favor?
on a great budget process. Thank you. This is very, one of the easiest budgets ever to work on.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.